Nurse. Sometimes as mothers, we feel guilty. We feel that we should be showing up for our children in certain ways and that we could do it better. On today's Wednesdays with Willa podcast, we're going to have a deep dive into that experience and share some personal remembrances and also some tips of how to overcome that. And then from a medium's perspective, dealing with mother guilt when it comes to spirit and those here on the earth plane. So hope you're excited about today's show. Wednesdays with Willa is a beautiful topic show. I usually have a special guest on the show and we cover a spiritual topic relating to either spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, or more. And it's a beautiful opportunity to have a spiritual conversation that takes us into realms that help us understand things from a soul response. And I encourage you to look back at the archive videos of the show. You can find those on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium, and also on my YouTube channel. And this will also goes out on blogtalkradio.com/Lilydale Radio. I'm part of the Lilydale Radio family. And so there are shows that happen throughout the week, and I encourage you to tune into those so you can learn more about Lilydale. Now, I'd like to introduce my guest for today is Dot McCarthy. Thanks for being here today, Dot.
You're welcome.
Dot has been on the show before, and she is a delight. You can look back at the archive videos of the show and catch other things that we have been able to do together. I think our last one was dealing with ingratitude.
That's right. That's right.
That's a good one. And we've also talked about the course of love, and mental health, and all kinds of things. And the reason I call upon Dot McCarthy is because she is a beautiful soul. She's a retired psychiatric nurse, a Lilydale resident and spiritual healer. And she brings so much to the table in a gentle, beautiful way. And sometimes I call her the fairy godmother because she's always thinking of others and showing up with little special things that you don't expect and then just delight your day. And you are a mother of five. And five grown children and grandma of four and originally from a family of seven children. Right. So Dot knows how to be around kids.
I've been around for a while. I'm not an expert by any means, but yeah, I've been around them.
I would say pretty close.
Yeah.
Pretty close. And she's an advisor to many. And we're so glad that you could be here today to talk about this important topic. I know when you came on the show to talk about dealing with ingratitude, after that show, we got talking about mother guilt and what that feels like and what that means. And first of all, let's start with what is mother guilt. Sometimes people call it mom guilt or mommy guilt. And it's that name that is given to that feeling that we go through as mothers when we feel like we're not enough or that we're doing something wrong by our children and for our children, and that we're not available the way we should, we're not showing up the way we should. There are all kinds of instances. And those of you who are tuning into the show, we don't mean to leave fathers by the wayside, but especially because we are mothers. And
we're the general caretakers.
We are the general
we're with them all day long. And you got to work full time.
Exactly.
That's
which
even
can
tougher.
also cause
that can be a lot of problem.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's we don't want to leave them out. It's just some of these can apply to fathers as well, but we're going to come more from the perspective of mothers, especially because Mother's Day is coming up. And we want to honor mothers and all the things that they go through, the positive and the negative, and in the growing up of children and the growing up of their own selves.
And the reflection of how we were raised.
Yeah.
We go into that with some of that. Pros and cons. Some of the things I did not want to repeat.
Sure.
And that was okay. That was a constant, not repeating. My father was very physical. And I said I would never do that. Well, I didn't stick to that 100%, but I would not use that kind of discipline. And so I never really did with my kids. So how we were raised, we bring that with us. And we really are affected by it, even though we don't realize it, because we're in the same situation when we have kids, you know,
Yeah.
that our parents were. So, yeah. And of course, talking to your sisters and brothers, you know.
Sure. And comparing notes.
My sisters all had children.
What was it like for you in your perspective of
Yeah.
being raised by mom and dad and,
Yeah.
and those kinds
Oh,
of
yeah, we get
circumstances?
together, our family's close, and we get together. And
Yeah.
it was so funny because one time I was at a reading and it was someone, my father came through and he said, I hear you talking about me when you're all together. I did have some good qualities, and it really made me conscious of, wait a minute, I got to look at my father's qualities. He was very physical with little girls. We had 6 girls and 1 boy. And it made me realize that that's true. He did a lot of things, and I needed to bring those things up. And so that was the last time I allowed myself to get into that discussion about his physical stuff. But I would always bring up, yeah, but don't you remember when he did this? And don't you remember when he did that?
Yeah.
So I felt I was championing him,
Yeah.
and saying that there was other sides of him, you know.
That's important.
It was.
And I just have to say, as a medium, when I'm in a reading and in communion and conversation with those in spirit and presenting things to the client, it's very fascinating to me, the family dynamics that show up.
Exactly.
One of the predominant ways I try to work as a medium is to talk about relationship.
Yeah.
When you bring through the essence of a person from spirit, you want to bring through all kinds of different identifiers that are evidence. I think for so many people, having that evidence of, I know what I was like when I was here on earth playing, the good, the bad, the otherwise, and I've been able to recognize those things. And I really do see how this may have been difficult for you, and this might have been
Yeah.
difficult, and how I would have caused this domino effect in the
Yeah.
family. And so sometimes they come through and they
Yeah.
apologize. They have their mother or their father guilt about what has gone
Yes.
on.
Yes.
And during their lifetime, and they just want that to be done with now, almost like the
They
entanglement
wanted,
energetically that had
Yes.
been there,
yes.
so that things can be gentle
Yeah.
and things can be loving,
Yeah.
and that there can be peace
Well, I
between
think
them.
the forgiveness, that's where the forgiveness comes in.
Yeah.
And you can say to them in a reading, I forgave you for that, you know? And to
And
me,
clients do.
oh, well, to me, the
do.
forgiveness is as much for me as it is for them. It's letting go. So yeah, but you know, one of the things I have to say, and I don't know, and I've always used this with my kids. My mother had 7 kids. We didn't have much. We were pretty poor. And we moved out in the country. My father was 6 girls. We were in a black neighborhood. It was white at one time. It became black. Anyhow, I always knew my mother loved me. And my mother went through a period of depression because my father was pretty, not physical, I shouldn't say it, verbally, you know, abusive. And as I got older, I thought, what did my mother do to let me know that she loved me? Now, my mother has come through in readings and said, thank you for loving me so much, because I did. And you know why? Because there was no doubt in my mind that she loved me. So I thought, if my kids can know that I love them like my mother, any mistake it doesn't make any difference. So I've always felt so fortunate, and I don't know if my sisters experienced that. I know they haven't, because they saw hers when she went through a depression. They saw my father has all the power, and my mother has never none. I didn't see it that way. I saw my mother as working as hard as she could, you know, to raise 7 kids. So that was always my goal, raising my 5 kids. I wanted them to know that I loved them. But I didn't really know how my mother did it. But my kids' feedback to me now is they know I love them. I've made mistakes, you know, more than one. But I know, because they tell me, they write it in their cards, they tell me on the phone. So I know that my kids love me. And to be very honest, Isn't there something that kind of love makes all mistakes not even important?
Well,
Yeah.
and it's fascinating because when a person looks over, let's say, their own lifetime, and they may think about their mother or their father, the parental authority figure, sometimes they had instances where they felt reprimanded when they shouldn't have
sure.
been reprimanded.
Oh, sure.
They have instances where they actually feel guilty, but because they're still wrangly, they can't fix it in the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
And the parents have to work through that.
Yeah.
I've been blessed with amazing parents. I mean, you guys have seen them on the show. They've been guests on the show.
And I know them both.
And you know them.
Yeah.
So I've been blessed with parents, and there are so many things that I have not had to deal with.
Yeah.
But I've seen it in
Yeah.
others. I've seen the pain that they've been in those instances where they have felt that their mother or their father didn't love them.
Yeah.
That was not supportive through some key moments of their life. And so they've had to become their own parent, essentially.
Yeah.
And everything that they feel that someone hasn't given to them, they've had to work to give to themselves and rise above it. But then they still have to enter into that space of it's okay to be vulnerable. You can trust others beyond those kinds of situations. But by and large, when you're raising children, you're doing the best you can. Maybe you are overwhelmed with what's going on, or you've had postpartum depression. I mean, people get very triggered.
Yeah.
The chemistry.
Yeah.
Or
I remember after
hormone
my
thing.
first child, I had anemia. I didn't even know that. But I remember sitting at the kitchen table and I didn't know if I could lift my arms. I was so tired. And I thought it was because I just had a brand new baby.
Sure.
But my
In some
blood
ways,
count
yes.
it was, but my blood count was way down. But yeah, there's been periods in my life, and I don't think I knew I was depressed at the time. Looking back, I saw that I was depressed. And but I was having problems with marriage too at the same time. See, I had 5 kids in 7 years. So I was getting overwhelmed with babies. And when I went to the doctor after the 5th, he said, Dot, you are so fertile, you could have a baby every year. Well, you don't want to hear that after your 5th.
Right.
And you still got baby beds all over. And he said, you got to do something other in our religion. Of course, it was a rhythm in the Catholic Church, which wasn't out working for me.
Sure.
So I had to make a decision, and it wasn't a popular one with my husband because he didn't believe in that.
Mhm.
So that caused pressure right there.
Sure.
I knew I couldn't handle more than with what I had.
Mhm.
I knew that when I was pregnant with the 5th, I still had little kids. And I'll never forget pushing. I was out the year pregnant. I had 1 in the buggy and 3 on the sides. I had to hold on to the buggy because they were so little. I thought, I can't do that.
Like literally, a mother duck with all her little ducklings.
And if you're going around the block with your 4 kids, they're saying, you're ready to have that baby. Yeah, it's like, no, if I could put this off for another 6 months, it'd be fine.
It's
I was
exhausting.
exhausted.
New
Yeah.
mothers, new fathers, they typically don't get a chance to sleep
No.
much.
No.
And you almost feel selfish for any second you don't have that you're not with a child. And I would
That's
feel
right.
guilty going to the bathroom and taking a shower initially.
Well, you never go to, well, first of all, you never go to the bathroom alone.
No.
You never, the door is always open. But I think the thing is like when you have one in your arm and the other one just needs his shoe tied, and
You can't do it.
you can't do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's lots. But here's one of the things I must tell you right away. You find other women that are going through the same thing. Your friends are having babies usually at the same time. And we had a thing called Bishop's Committee in the Catholic Church. And it was women that got together and talked about children, raising children.
Mm.
And of course it was Christian based, because it was Brunswick Catholic Church. But you were together with other women.
You were bonding.
You were bonding. And so we would have meetings. I can't remember how often, but it was women dealing with the same thing that you're dealing with. And it was interesting because there was some women that had to work. And so we did it in the evening. I didn't work at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget sitting there one time. And I heard this lady who I didn't know down the road that she had kids. And she was just she had her own ideas and they weren't necessarily what everybody else's consensus was. And I thought, I like that lady. I got to get to know her because she just has a different outlook.
What was her outlook?
You know, she just was a free thinker. She didn't, I'll never forget her name because it's Chiavetta. Remember Chiavetta Chicken?
Yeah.
Well, her last name was Chiavetta. She was in that family. And that, I mean, she's a grandmother too, and I loved her dearly. But it's just because she just had a different, she wasn't a rubber stamp of everybody else. And that's what I liked. I couldn't give you any particular example, but she just thought differently, you know, and she was accepted. That was no problem. So I eventually ended up leading that group, you know, and so it's where you could go and say, you know, Joey had croup one time where you sit there and you're breathing with them. They're so bad at night. And I said, I wanted to open the window and throw him right out. I was so tired being up for like 2 or 3 nights. And every time he breathed, you breathed. And when he stopped, anyhow.
Yeah, it's hard on
You
you.
could go there and say that.
Harder.
And nobody would say, what? Do you want to throw with your, no, I wanted to throw him.
They wouldn't be like, this
They're
is,
not judgmental.
yeah.
They were all in it
You
together.
had a thought.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's just a random
Frustration.
thought, the frustration that takes hold, and then in the next moment you're like,
Oh, no, it
it's
didn't
gone.
last.
It doesn't last.
And I never opened the
Those
window.
are ideas that don't last. If things
No.
persist beyond,
But see, that's the guilt.
that's the
See,
difference.
I felt guilty thinking that way. Now, I was exhausted and this kid was sick. I mean, he had doctor's care and I would, and we had a wonderful doctor, but it's all right to say you're exhausted. You don't want to do this anymore in the moment. You're not acting on it. You shouldn't get scared about those thoughts,
Right.
but to be able to say them and people say, boy, I know how you feel. So that sharing, that was helpful. And you're with friends that have the same kids. You know, when you were raising the boys, you probably had people you could talk to.
Exactly.
So it's important. It's
And
important
to
to have
be
friends.
there for each other.
Exactly.
Through those times.
The other thing is my family was all out of town. I didn't have any of my family here. So we moved to Hamburg and there was an empty lot next door and we were there for a couple of years and John's brother decided to buy it. So he and his wife at that time had no children, but by the time they moved in, they had a little girl. So my sister-in-law Joyce was like my sister. Today she is.
Nice.
And so I had that with her. But I had no one to watch the kids when things got bad, no one to run over, and because Joyce was working also. And that's tough when you don't have any break.
And it causes even more of a, there's mother guilt and then there's mother shame. So like mother guilt would be an example of that is I feel bad that I don't have time to spend with my child.
Yeah.
And mother shame would be, I'm a terrible mother.
Yeah.
So those are those would be the distinctions.
Yeah.
About this.
I felt bad that I had never had time to read to them. I never had time. By the time I got the 5 of them in the tub into bed, I was exhausted. And here's what happened one time, not just once. As I'm getting the kids all in bed, all 5 of them now, they're clean, they're in bed, and I'm walking down the street 5 steps, you know, and my hair is wet. And my husband says, can you fix me a sandwich?
And you were
I did not know. See, here's the shame. Here's the guilt. I don't know what I thought, why am I so angry? See, I didn't understand why that made me angry.
Because it was tipping point for
Because
you.
he never got up off the chair to put them into bed or give them. And it took me years to realize that John and I were raised reading the same book. The mother should do this and the father should do this. The mother takes care of the house and the kids and the food, and the father goes to work. And when he comes home, he sits and reads the newspaper while you put. See, we both read those same books. So I didn't understand why I was so angry. See, there was some guilt about wanting to throw the sandwich at him.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's a sandwich.
Sort
But
of
yeah,
cook. Here you
So
go.
yeah, so we raised up with roles.
Sure.
See, he read the same roles that I did.
And if he had been able to just give you a little bit of help here and there.
Yeah.
It would have been a different story.
Yeah,
for
but
you
see, I read
to
the
feel
same
that
book, so I was
supportive
yeah, but
and-
I was just as much
Mhm.
responsible for that.
Yeah.
And yeah,
But you do the best you can in those circumstances. And I think that when it comes to dealing with mother guilt, sometimes you have to declare some time for yourself.
Yeah.
You have to, sometimes people go through phases where they're just desperate for some adult time
yeah,
and adult conversation that they can't have
Yeah.
with the kids. And there's a joy of motherhood.
Yeah.
There's nothing that we're saying today to try to take away from the joy
Oh,
of
no.
motherhood. But there's this
No.
other side to deal with, because it can make people then spoil their kids sometimes because they feel guilty in other ways, and allow certain bad behaviors in their children persist because they felt badly that they
Yeah.
lost their temper or didn't like something about their child in another instance. So, I remember hearing some advice. When because you're basically training yourself and you're training your child as this is going on, and they said, don't do anything, don't train your child in any way that's going to make you not like them.
Oh my, I would hope to God that would
Right?
never.
Because there are people who say, I don't like my
Oh
children.
my God.
I know there are people. So that I always took that to heart, because I love my children and I like my children.
I do too.
And I think that a big part of that is you have to have discipline, and discipline doesn't mean punishment per se. It means respect that's going on there that you have with between you and your child, and you're trying to raise them in a spiritual parenting kind of way. And I think that that's something to keep in mind. If there's something that you truly see as something you don't like about your child, look at how you've been supporting that behavior.
Yeah, I never thought of that. Raising your child and allowing him to have behavior that you don't like. I just
there
never.
are people that do that because they feel guilty reprimanding them, and they all in the sense of, oh no, they remember being reprimanded, so they're being like a little too gentle for certain
So they won't.
for certain kids. It's just not well in their nature to listen. And so there's things, and then it creates this bigger problem. And then when they've had to look at that, let's say when a client comes and they have adult children. Now we're past all the little kid stuff. Let's say we're in the upper teens and adulthood stuff that's going on. And then they're looking at this going, oh my goodness, I allowed this, and then this snowballed, and here we are. So sometimes the mother guilt is not just about little things of, I wish I had my adult time or any of those things. It's what have I done to contribute? Is this the nature of the child and beyond my doing? And what have I contributed? Because even as spiritualists, we have to look at spiritual natural law and effect in life, the law of personal responsibility. What's my personal responsibility? And how the law of creative reality. How have I created this reality? And ultimately, how do I help my child? Take personal responsibility for their own reactions and actions and words and deeds. And how do I show up for them so that they can move into that space in a healthy way? So let's talk. Do you mind if we lean into that part?
Because I think, if there's a problem, we've had, certainly my family life wasn't, I mean, my kids, there wasn't a situation where we never had problems or somebody didn't have problems. But I think what you're talking about is when that happens, you have to assess, am I feeding into this in some way? Is this a reaction to me? And that's self-examination. And I think that has to be honest. If it's not honest, then it's not worth anything. But if you can be honest with yourself, is a parenting responsible for this? And then if it isn't, then you get them help for whatever reason, and you put your guilt aside and say, I need help with this, because this is bigger than I am.
And sometimes people get so heavy into their shame about that that they are then hiding it. And it's that feeling of, well, family honor precludes talking about this or dealing with this, because then other people might know. And so there's that being willing to go into those
Yeah.
deeper muddy recesses
Sure.
of yourself
You might
and
end
of
up
your
well,
family.
you might end up in family therapy, where you're all talking about how you're raising the kids and how they're reacting to you.
Mhm.
And you do have to step aside and put all your own feelings aside, because somebody
Tricky,
needs help.
tricky.
Well, you do that. I think you do that for your children. You know, it's uncomfortable, it's embarrassing, because, you know, as a mental health therapist, I would refer them to mental health if they needed to, and I've had to do that. And so I've been through it, and I know that you have to just put that, if there's guilt, deal with it. Figure out and be honest with yourself. There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't think I'm responsible for this. And if you got a good therapist, they'll tell you whether you are or not.
Yeah,
In a
they'll tell you
kind,
whether
nice
you should
way.
be wallowing a little
That's
bit more
yeah,
in it,
that's
or
right.
whether you should.
Or change the behavior, you
Yeah,
know, or
yeah.
change the behavior. But yeah, I think getting help is the same thing as getting help if you need a doctor. You
Mhm.
don't not go to a doctor.
Sure.
You know, it's like you recognize the symptoms and you do something about it, whether it's physical or it's mental.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you put your guilt aside to get them. I think you put the guilt aside to get them help with whatever it is.
You want to have build that healthy foundation again
Exactly.
with a child. And even though I say the word child, you know, again, a person is your child, no matter what age they are.
That's right.
I've had people come through in spirit. The client's like 70 years old, and their mom comes in, and of course they see them like a little child still,
Yeah.
and they love them like that.
Oh my.
It
Yeah.
happens that way.
See, my mom and dad both come through now, and I have two sisters in spirit, and they come through. And they talk about our life together. And my two sisters are with my mother and father. I mean, not with them all the time, but when they come through, they come in and they talk about one another. And
Yes.
my two sisters come in and say, all the issues on earth, we've dealt with them. I think, good for you.
Yes.
You know, they've
Yes.
dealt with them. They don't need to deal with them anymore. And
But then they'll talk about the issues that are going on around you, the client,
Yeah,
as it were.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
they don't, I've never, they don't give me too much advice. No, see, my kids are all grown, and
Right.
so, but they can just come through and let me know that they know what's going on and they're with me. And see, I've been divorced for over 30 years, so raising the kids at a certain age was really my responsibility. I mean, their father was still there, don't really get it wrong. My kids were all sports addicts because their father was. And so it was wonderful because the boys, Anne was a runner. The boys were in every sport that you can imagine. So to me, if your kids are in sport, with my words example, they were always busy. And they were with healthy other kids that were in sports.
Mhm.
And so it made my life very easy, you know, for them to be always playing basketball or football. And
So they have a physical outlet for a lot of the things that are going on.
very much so.
You know, children do need that. They need a
But you
physical
know,
outlet.
something happened when I had my third child. One of the things I guess, you know, realizing sometimes your discipline with the kids can just be a look.
Yes.
We all know that.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
we've heard it, we've lived with it, it's a look. And so I remember it as a kid, it was the look. And so we don't have to sometimes put a hand on them or, you know,
This is
whatever.
true.
It's just the look. Well, now I have the third child and the look doesn't affect him. I'm thinking,
Oh, no.
oh my God, he doesn't care whether I'm happy or not. I had to treat him differently. And so that was he's very, very bright. And probably the smartest one of all my kids, and he's an attorney in Boston. But here's a different kid.
Yeah.
Now I got to treat him differently.
Good.
So when the company used to come, they used to laugh about this. I'd say, okay, we're going to be like the Brady Bunch. If people remember the Brady Bunch, you're going to vacuum that room. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And they used to say, we hate company. Yeah, well, go do what you're supposed to do. So the boys vacuum, the boys wash their own uniforms. I mean,
Yes,
got
yes.
very independent. And
Responsibilities. are
then
important.
I got this third one that says, he's smart as everybody, and he's saying, I don't know what, I thought, see, I have to treat him, I have to say, Johnny, here's what I want you to do. I want you to do this. And it was a thing that with time too, he couldn't stand go. Some of the others knew they go, they'd get the vacuum and they'd go. And he'd say, it was throwing him this time thing. And I was have to deal with him differently. I'd say, I want you to do your list by 3:00. Oh, okay. See, it was just, so I had to
You had to
switch.
tell him the deadline.
The third one I had
Yeah.
to switch, so that was helpful for me.
Yeah.
Because the next two, they were only 18 months apart, the next two, were kind of different, the same, the look, disapproval, but you could, you maneuver them, but you really don't realize what your look and everything. So anyhow, but this once in a while you get one that you cannot discipline or reason with as the others. And that was a good lesson for me. I had to adjust.
How to handle the defiance.
Yeah.
Is really
Yeah,
important.
and it really wasn't defiance on his part. He needed things explained to him.
Ah,
He wasn't just go vacuum.
he needs it explained.
So yeah.
Almost with a legal document.
So yeah, oh, he's an attorney, he knows that. But so what happened is it made me have to readjust to how I handled that one. It would have been a problem if I tried to handle him the same way I handled the other
It would have
kids.
caused more
It would have
problems.
caused him a lot more
And
problems.
it would not have solved anything. So sometimes as parents, we have to pivot.
Well,
Yeah.
he has such, what's different is he had such self-esteem. He didn't care that you weren't happy. He was happy. See, that's a little different.
It's
To this
very
day,
different.
it's a different lesson.
It is.
His self-esteem did not depend on outside forces.
No people pleasing for him, huh?
No. And he loved money. He was a paper boy, and he used to put all his money on the mattress when he collected. Him and Timmy were both paper boys. And they put their money out, and he'd say, do you want to come count my money? I'd say, no, thanks, Johnny, I think. And one day I opened up the encyclopedia, and under C for cash, he was hiding money in there. He was very bright.
Yeah.
But yeah, everyone is very different. And I think as a mother, you learn to look at them. What works with one doesn't always work with the other, but you're learning at the same time.
That's right. And that's why building that rapport with a child is so very important through those instances. And I know from my own personal experience, and I've read it in books later on, that, up to the age of 7, children really need their mothers and be able to come back into their space, their aura. That's why you might have a barnacle child that wants to come and just and you're kind of almost like touched out a little bit, but it's because they need to get back into your aura, back into your energy again, and then reduced, and then they can go back out. And sometimes even as they grow older, they need that from time to time to touch in with their mom again. It's like it's a place of divine source for them, if they can get it, and they may have to have that with other mothers. Like occasionally they find other people who show up to be their mom through those.
My oldest son Tim, I called him the other day, and in fact he went with me to go get a new mattress. I'm ashamed to tell anybody how long it's been since I had a new mattress. And I woke up one day and my hip was hurting me so bad, and I thought, it's that mattress is so old. So I tell people 50 years, but I know it's longer than that. But I was at that element, the mattress on my bed wasn't important. So he went with me. He said, I'll go with you. I'll go with you and show you how to. I said, I don't even know how to shop for mattresses.
No, mattresses are totally different now.
So he's one, and I called him the other day, and he said, I'm over at Mary Bates's house. Well, Mary Bates is the mother of his very good friend, and his very good friend is out of state.
Mm-hmm.
And he's over taking care of Mary Bates. Now he's living with my sister-in-law who lived next door to me all those years. And so she lives alone. So Tim living with her, she says, I sleep better since he's there. the other day she had went to a wake and he took her.
Oh,
So I see
I
him,
love it.
I see the loving part. He says he's very open to express.
Yeah.
And he's mothering these, he's taking care of these, and he comes and takes care of me.
Aw.
So he takes care of, so there you go. You, when you see that, you think, didn't do such a bad job, you
That's
know,
right. When you see them go out in the world
And
and
love
help other
someone
people.
else.
Yeah.
that they can do that and be kind.
Yes. It's exciting
very
to see that. It helps you to go, wow, you did something right.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, my son, that's an attorney, very successful, 4 children, very, very high expectations of the children. They're wonderful kids, but they all do well. They're all straight A students. They all go to big colleges. Anyhow, he once in a while, when he was little, there was so many Johnnies on the street that we called him Johnny Babe. He was the youngest of
Johnny
all of them.
Babe.
It was the John, you know, because that was the time of the Kennedys, the John.
Yes, yes.
Well, he was Johnny Babe. So every once in a while, he's very funny and he writes, he's the 3rd kid. He'll write on his note, Johnny Babe.
Johnny Babe,
Yeah.
just to be
Yeah,
funny.
he's in his 50s. Johnny Babe.
It's
yeah.
cute.
Yeah,
I
so
love
they,
it.
yeah, so they have that little kid still in them,
Yeah.
you know.
That even persist. And it's fascinating to me how, depending on who we are with, we can take on different roles and become different people.
Yeah.
And in a family, you tend to kind of get pigeonholed in a certain way and in how they perceive you. And even how people perceive their mothers.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me the way people perceive their mothers and their fathers. And let's say siblings have readings with me, and they'll be like, you know, this is totally different. It's totally different the way this mother is coming through to this sibling compared to the other one because they had different relationships.
Oh, you know
what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you know, I'm telling you, I just read a book when I was in Florida, The 5th Dimension.
Okay.
We read the 4 dimensions. The 5th Dimension, I loved it. You know, we go into theaters and there's 10 theaters.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, I had to, as soon as I read it, I had to call my sisters and say, get this book. You go into a theater and there's 10 theaters. And you go into this one, it's your mother's. And
Wow.
she's sitting there, she doesn't even know you're there.
Yes. Yes.
Her life is completely different than when you saw her. And then you leave hers and you go to your father's. And it's like, oh my God, he sees everybody different. And then you go into your, it was such a wonderful experience. I absolutely love the fact that you are not the focus of everybody's life.
It's true.
Their own, and they see you differently sometimes as you saw yourself with them.
And it also changes the perception of possible mother guilt and how we feel about those things.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts that you wanted to share with folks today about mother guilt, or instances that come to mind that you really have had to overcome some of your own mother guilt?
One of the examples, you see, I just went through my albums. I'm making an album for my grandchild, which meant that I had to look at all the pictures and take his out. I was the picture taker. Nobody's taking pictures anymore. So I'm looking at my kids when they were 2 and 3 and 1. And so it was interesting to see them go back and look at their pictures.
Yeah.
But one of the things that happened when Joey was the youngest, and Joey was going to school, and this is the thing what mothers should do. And so Joey was getting ready for school, and it was chilly out, and he didn't want to wear an undershirt. I said, you got to wear an undershirt. It's cold out.
Yes.
I don't want to wear an undershirt. I had him down on his back, trying to put this undershirt on him so he would be warm. And right in the middle of it, I'm looking at him. He's young, like 1st or 2nd grade, and I'm thinking, what are you doing? You're sending him to school after you wrestled him on his back to put a t-shirt on? For God's sake, let him go to school without a t-shirt. See, mother guilt. Well, he'll be cold.
You're cold.
And I thought,
I have had the same, oh no, make sure you get your jacket on. Oh no. Like,
I said, Joe, I mean, I was thankful. I said, Joe, I'm sorry. Put your shirt on. Go to school the way you want. I thought, send him to school with some loving feelings instead of my
Yeah.
mother wrestled me to the ground. And so it's like that guilt that he should be warm.
Mhm.
And I'm sending him off cold. Well, he's got a jacket. He's not going there without. But that was so silly.
It's
that I
so silly, but
remembered
at the
it.
same time, it's like, as a mom, you know, they're probably gonna get cold, and then,
And you're arguing with them.
and da, 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 da. And so there's that back and forth that goes on.
How many times have you argued with?
Tell them to
Yeah.
get their shoes on, they haven't got their shoes on
Yeah.
yet.
Well, my sister-in-law next door said,
We're trying to
she
leave.
only had one kid, and she said, your kids go to school in all kinds of weather because all they wear is sneakers, and she says they never get cold. My kid goes to school one day without her boots on. She's got a terrible cold. So that, see, they didn't wear anything but sneakers.
Right.
They liked, their preference was good sneakers because they were all in Athens.
Mhm.
So their important was sneakers, but and money was tight, so they didn't have a lot of options. But so yeah, that guilt that gets in there,
And it can, and you're right, sometimes mother guilt can not make you allowing, but it can make you harden up because you
Yeah.
think, I need.
well, you're
them
feeling
to-"
more about yourself. Well,
Yeah.
you know, when they talk about your
It's so
children are
good.
an example of you,
Mhm.
and if your child's a problem that reflects on you, I got rid of that somewhere along the line. Maybe just by having 5, I don't know, but I didn't, well, my kids didn't get into that much trouble. They were too busy, you
Mhm,
know.
mhm.
I had one that stole from a show. Oh my God. But I found out that
When he
was,
stole from a show.
he was at the show with his brothers. And I found out later it was a rite of passage, and I'll tell you why. I saw it happen in another family.
Okay.
The one that did this was the goody two shoes of our family. Good, quiet, never got into trouble. Now they all go to the show, local show by themselves, because it was with 2 or 3 blocks away. And they all went to the show. He was there with his brothers, and he reached in and took a candy bar. So the guy caught him, and he ran out, and the guy ran out after him. But the problem is the guy ran him into traffic, which I found out later. But anyhow, Michael knew his brothers were younger, were in the theater. He had to come back for them. So when he came back for them, the owner caught him. So now the next day, all I hear is the ride in the police car. And Michael is like, we rode in the police car, and Mike, it was almost like a rite of passage. He's not a goody two shoes anymore. Now, a family of 8, the father calls me, Dot, would you go to the police station with me? My wife's working or something. And I knew them. I knew all the kids. They all went with mine. The one in his family that was the goody two shoes had stole a baseball glove or something from Walmart. So we're now going to pick him up. Now, see, it's right of passage.
Wow.
They have to do these,
Interesting.
and looking at it that way,
Wow.
you don't judge it quite so harshly. And you don't judge it. What did I raise? I didn't raise my kids to steal candy. I mean, I remember one of them, when every time you go to a drugstore, they have all that candy. And your kid comes home and you're saying, what's in it? Your hand, it's a candy bar. And you take them back and give it back to the man and tell him you're sorry. We've all done that, you know. But there's something about being responsible, but there's also something about looking at it a little deeper. What's
So
going
that
on
they
with them?
have a true understanding of consequences.
Well, they had consequences. And, you know, the police did bring them home in the car, but they knew the kids too, you know.
And then it was a different time.
It was different. Yeah,
They,
it was
they
a
would have
different time.
reacted completely
And they
differently.
just reprimanded in front of everybody and
Mhm,
let it go, you know.
mhm.
But so the reason I bring that up is that, you know, you can feel guilty about what your kid did, but you can look at some other meaning of what's going on with him. He knew I didn't like the fact that what he did, but I didn't punish him. I don't remember punishing him. But I did see the effects that it had the next day at school.
And the effect the next day at school,
He was like one of the boys.
that you somehow.
He wasn't quite the goody two shoes. It
and
just
then-
it
It dissipated that.
yeah.
And then fast forward that further into his life.
He was the one this is another child that came along, and he was the fourth. And when he was born with a very big clot in his cord.
Mm.
And I remember, because I had all the kids natural, that was the thing then. And I said to the doctor, what is that? He said, well, that is what you see when sometimes the kids don't make it.
Oh,
This clot, this big clot. And so when he came home from the hospital, he's the only one I would say, okay, Michael, it's time for a nap. And he'd take my hand. I thought, what is this? I used to have to fight him and drag him up the steps for their nap. He'd take my hand and we'd go upstairs and he'd lay down. And I thought, he was just a different kid. He loved to be picked up and he'd put his little head on your shoulder. You know, you've always loved to have a kid do that.
Yeah.
But he could get hurt real easily.
Mm.
But sometime after a while, and this is in grade school, because I got a call from the third grade teacher saying, you need to come pick Michael up. And I said, why? Because he broke the kid's nose.
Mm.
I said, he what? I mean, I was up there in 2 minutes, even though at that time we didn't have double cars. Everybody didn't have that.
Everybody else.
So anyhow, I go up there and find out that Michael was playing football and his nose, he was the center. And he went down and he was still ready to throw the ball back. And this kid hit him from behind and hit his nose into the gravel. And Michael turned around, never thought, and the fist went right in his face. Now, I realized I got a kid that the only thing people see is the anger. They don't realize he's been hurt first. So that was another different kind of kid. I remember buying him one of those big clowns that you fill up with air that he would punch.
Oh, the punchy clown things.
And I would have him punch the back, but you didn't always see what hurt him. What you saw was Michael's anger. And so he got the reputation of being a tough guy, but he wasn't. And he also got the reputation of being Joey's bodyguard. Joey was the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody got towards Joey, Michael would step in. And I didn't realize that he did that with me. That I would go after Joey, and Joey was a handful. I would go after Joey, and Michael would be there in front of him. It took me a little bit to notice that. He was Joey's bodyguard, and Joey loved it. He loved it. He threatened people with Michael. So one day, a young boy who I never knew came to the door. I knew all my kids' friends because they were invited in the house.
Mm-hmm.
They stayed overnight. I needed to know who they were running with. This boy came and wanted to talk to Michael in the living room privately. He came with another boy and they went in, and I thought, there's a red flag. As soon as they came, I said, Mike, who is that? And what does he want? Well, there's going to be this big grumble between these two schools, and he wanted me to join them.
Oh,
That wasn't going to happen. And
like
he
Fight
knew.
Club.
Fight Club. He knew that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
That kid took a gun to that rally and shot somebody.
Oh.
Mhm, mhm.
Oh.
So your kids, and as a mother, what they can do and what they can't do. And if somebody said, you defend them too. But you see, when you talk about spoiling, you can get into that and not accept that is your kid's behavior, whether you like it or not. I didn't like the fact that Michael hit before he knew or didn't experience that, wasn't able to say I was hurt before he was angry. I knew that would probably cause him trouble in his life. But so defending your kid, you also have to know that they make mistakes too. And I think that's where a mother can harm her kids, to say my kid wouldn't do that, when you know darn well they would have. You know what I mean?
That's an important
So you
point.
lie for them.
Wow.
Or you protect them. I guess that's what you're doing. You're protecting them from the consequences. They should. I remember taking my kids in the Cub Scouts to the jail, and I had them lock them all in. It was just a little local jail.
So they could
get a taste of it. Yeah. And know the policeman. And so I remember they all remembered being locked up. They thought that was nice, you know.
They thought it was
Yeah,
nice.
they did. They thought it was fun. That wasn't supposed to be fun.
No,
But so I enjoyed
not
my
to be fun.
kids. Yeah, I enjoyed my kids.
Yeah.
But again, I was going through divorce. And so some of my kids were in college by the time, but I still had, Joey was the one affected by the divorce more than any of them. He was acting out and I didn't realize it till later, you know.
Mhm.
But he's also the most spiritual of all of them.
Mm.
When I came to Lilydale, when I was going through divorce, I came to Lilydale, got my first reading with Elaine Thomas, and start reading everything I could get my hands on because I knew about healing and just spirit. And so Joe, I practiced on Joe. And I would say, Joe, come down to the beach, Hammered Beach. I want to tell you a story. And so I told the story. All the seagulls, Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Oh,
He says, Mom, I'll never
beautiful.
forget it. You told me that story. All these seagulls. And then one time I took him down there and I had him on a log and told him the story about when Jesus came in and the apostles were all sitting on the log. So he was the one I was practicing and healing.
And he embraced that
He went to school.
on a deeper
He
level.
went to Elaine's school for
Beautiful.
2 years. Timmy went for sit 1 and 2, but he was working at that time. And so Joey's the one that went the whole time and does healing. Timmy does healing. And so that spiritual thing, you pass on what you learn to the kids.
Do your best to provide them with some spiritual foundation,
Yeah.
so that they have something to fall back on when
Yeah.
they go through difficult times
Yeah.
in their life, when there are moral questions,
Yeah.
when there are dilemmas or crisis. They need to have those
Yeah.
spiritual underpinnings in them
Yeah.
as much as possible.
Yeah. So they, you know, they learn what you learn, I think.
Mhm.
You know, when you learn and then you bring it home and you share it with them. And
But you don't say, you know, it's not a strict, you're going to learn this now and you better be able to recite it back to me kind of
Yeah.
situation. It's a true sharing, and it's a way so that they can feel that their spiritual experiences
yeah,
are helped and fostered by you. And just the sharing of it helps to bring you closer as souls.
yeah, exactly. And, you know, I bought each one of them a Course in Miracle meditation book every morning.
Yeah.
And, you know, and when I was in Florida, Anne was with me and so was Joe. And so we read that every morning. And we reread the 4 agreements and I was reading the 5th. And so Joey has said to me, you know, Mom, you taught us to care about people. And I remember when they would call somebody fat, because I always had a problem with my weight. When they called somebody fat, I'd say, no, overweight. You don't call them fat. This was my issue, you know. So they used to always laugh. It's not fat, it's overweight. So little things.
Things you need plump.
Yeah, yeah. But I would just say, you say overweight. I don't want to hear fat out of your mouth. But so yeah, as you grow, they grow. I mean, they don't have to take it on. Johnny is very much, you know, an attorney into the law and, you know, finances and things like that. But he does. I sent him a book too. And he came back with something the other day that made me realize he was reading it.
It's soaking in. You've planted a seed in them. You don't even know when that's going to grow up in them, bloom. But just know that there are all these seeds that you can plant that will help.
And they also know that I have forgiven their father. See, my ex-husband has passed 2 years ago, 2.5 maybe. His birthday was the other day. And when I talked to one son, I said, you know, today is Dad's birthday. And he said, I know the boys are passing around pictures of Dad when he was younger. Yeah. So that was that was nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can honor them, other people in your life, for what they've been able to bring to the equation, what they've served in other capacities. And I think that's a beautiful thing, that you're able to look at your ex-husband and honor him as their father, as your children's father, and have respect.
And they know, they know. he was more comfortable with the boys, that he would say, why don't you and Annie, and I'll take the boys, you know, he
Sure,
felt
sure.
that the sports was how they bonded with their
Mhm.
father.
Mhm.
And they know that I have forgiven their father years ago because I needed to forgive myself. It was
Mhm.
never a one-way street when things don't work out, you know? And so when he came through, he's come through twice. The first thing they did was ask for forgiveness. And I said, I forgave you already. You know, you need to know that I
And
forgave
I
you.
think it's about meeting that amicable space
Yeah.
within us, that we have to reach that amicable space for our own peace
Exactly. That's why you forgive, I
Yeah.
think.
and forgiveness.
You're forgiving for both sides,
We
you
did
know?
a show on forgiveness. I almost forgot we did a show on forgiveness too. Look back at that video, guys.
On forgiveness. I think
We've
that's a
done
big
some
thing.
great ones.
I think forgiveness is, and forgiveness for mothers. Oh my
Oh,
God.
yeah.
You know, I'll just tell you one more story that I remember as a mother. I shared this. My kids went through drinking. You know, some drank too much, some drank too fast. I saw that. And I prayed that they would, thank God they all went to college, but I prayed that they would get out of college without becoming a drunk or an addict. That was my please. I mean, I can stand the language because every other word is F when they come home from college. And I said, I'm giving you 2 weeks to get rid of that word, because it was like close the oven door. It was like unnecessary, totally unnecessary. But I'm gonna tell you
There are
something.
plenty of other words in the English language.
Yes, but
Express
apparently
yourself.
sometimes people feel that's the one that expresses them the best, you know? But anyhow, I was gonna tell you something, but it must not have been important because I
Oh.
forgot it.
Well, you were talking about how you made sure that they went through college, but they weren't going to be addicts and all of those
Yes,
things.
that was my prayer. So I didn't have a lot of expectation. It was that they passed and they got what they needed.
Mhm.
Coming home, I knew I could never substitute what they were getting at school. So they were always anxious to go back to school, which was wonderful because one went to Bonaventure, one went to Amherst, 2 of them to Buff State, and Joey went to Canisius.
And you want them to fly.
Yeah,
You're
yes.
wanting them to have autonomy in their
Yes.
lives and really grow.
And even if it's
thrive.
flying away from you, because I have kids in all different other states, you know.
And it's about letting them build that understanding of how to be responsible in their own lives and weaning them from you
Yeah,
as they progress
it's
through
that's
different areas.
healthy.
Mhm.
You know, the other thing that happened, and Joey brought this up, when I was divorced, my kids were in high school, college, and I had a group of friends. We went cross-country skiing, we went whitewater rafting, we went to picnics. And Joey says, Mom, you used to do a lot of things. And what I think had happened is they didn't need to take care of me, because boys have a tendency to take care of you.
Right.
They have a tendency to, I remember when John first was going with somebody, that was hard for them because there was somebody else in his life. And we were riding in the car, and one of them made some crack about, well, she's probably good in bed. And I said, wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. I knew his reason was to protect me. I knew that. And I said, we love her. She is taking care of your father. He is not lonely. I have you 5 living with me. He has no one. He has somebody now. We love her.
Well, send love and light.
Yes. That I only said that for them to know they didn't have to put her down to protect me. I knew that's what they were doing. So she loved coming to Lilydale. They loved coming out for readings. So she used to come out all the time. At the end, not when she first started going with John, but here's what I decided. This is something else, especially if you have parents that are divorced. When my kids came home from school, college, they had 2 parents they had to visit in a weekend. Now they're kind of trying to figure out, how can I do both of them in only 3 days?
Yeah.
So I called John. I said, this is ridiculous. the three of us are gonna get together for lunch with these kids, so that they don't have to make a decision of who they're gonna go with.
Mhm, mhm.
So the three of us would go to lunch with the kid that was coming home from college or whoever was making it. And that's how I got to know her, is having lunch with them. It's like, it's just lunch. We don't have to be bosom buddies, but it's lunch. She was very nice. I was very grateful to her for taking care of John for 30 years.
Wow. Wow.
So that's why the
That's how
kids,
you do it, folks.
that's how you do it for your kids. I
your
did that
kids.
for my kids.
That's right. You
Yeah.
do that for your children. So
So
that
if you
they-
have I guess what I'm saying is, if you have an ex,
Mhm.
you don't have to be miserable.
It doesn't have to be a miserable,
No.
nasty
After
thing.
she died, I used to go and help clean his apartment.
Mm.
Ann and I used to go and help him clean his apartment for
Mhm.
about a year after she passed away. But, and so the kids didn't have to make choices, you know, who am I gonna spend time with, I took that away from them, because that's what you do as a mother,
Mhm, mhm.
you know. I probably was a better mother than a wife. I don't know. But I know my kids love me. That's all I
Yeah.
can say.
And I tell you, it's really beautiful and fascinating for you to share all of these things with us today, because you've had such a wealth of experience in dealing with that from birth and until adulthood and children,
Yeah.
and that was it in yourself too. And managing being a mom is very challenging, and
is.
knowing how to enter into those things in a more conscious, aware way helps us all
Yeah.
to learn and grow, and to have that be what is perpetuated in the world. It's very, very important.
And you want your kids, your goal is you want your kids to grow and be good people.
Mhm.
I don't care if they're millionaires, but I don't want them to not be kind,
Right.
and I look at my 5 kids and they're kind. And Joey says, Mom, you taught us to be that. Joey's very verbal. So he'll say, because he was with me for 3 months. in
He
Florida,
gives you feedback.
yes, he gives me feedback. You made us. But what I was going to tell you before, and this is a lesson. Oh boy. Timmy was the first of my kids to go out and be out with his friends and drinking. He had a lot of friends, and he didn't come home when he was supposed to.
Mhm.
What a lesson. I stood in the dining room looking out the window. I had him in a ditch dying. That's why he's not home. He's dying in a ditch, so I can't be angry. I was so angry because he was causing
So you
me
were worried.
I was sick with worry.
Yeah.
So he's in a ditch dying, so you can't be angry. Don't be angry because he might be hurt. But then again, he might not be hurt. Maybe he's just staying out and pushing
He's
the
not
limit.
hurt.
He's not hurt. I'm not gonna. I mean to tell you, I put in an hour of absolute misery standing at that window. And then it was God inspired. I swear it was God. And I'm saying, are you going to do this all night? What if he's not in a ditch? What if he's just having fun with his friends? I think I am never going to do this again. That was the beauty of that.
Wow.
I am never going to stand at a window waiting for someone to come home. I'm going to bed. And if he's in the hospital, don't call me. I mean, it was like a half hour for the most important thing for the rest, because he was the first out drinking with his friends. And and I know women do this with their husbands sometimes that drink, they get angry and they're waiting for them to come, and they're waiting like bears. Timmy told me one time later after that, because I expressed it to him what had happened to me. I never did that with any other kids. Never stayed up at the window again. Prayed nothing happened to him. But he told me, Mom, sometimes when I was a kid, I knew if I did something, I would get in trouble, but I decided I'd rather do it and do what I want. And then I would take the consequences. Later, I thought, I don't know if I want to hear this. This is too much.
Take your lumps.
Take our lumps, and then I get to do what I want. But he wasn't, none of them ever caused me that kind of problem. I mean, I worried about
Sure.
Some of them drank too little much in college, and they're not drinking now.
And a big thing to keep in mind is no news is good news.
Yeah.
and to
Well,
keep
the
yourself.
spiritual thing was so helpful for me too, but I was in my 40s when, and it was, I don't like to hear, well, anyhow, I was raised Catholic and that did me just fine for that length of time. The guilt is implanted. I mean, that's there. You don't have to develop it. It's there. So mother guilt is just an extension of that. So when you get into the spiritual aspect of life, you start realizing everybody has their own responsibility to themselves and do what's right for them at a certain age.
Sure, a certain age.
But I would say communicating with other people. And if you don't have somebody, develop it somewhere. Develop it somewhere.
Develop it, become a good friend to others.
Yeah. Because you're going to have friends that aren't real good mothers. It happens sometimes, and sometimes you learn from their mistakes.
Yes, you can learn from all kinds of other people's mistakes instead of having to make them yourself.
That's right.
They show you exactly where the obstacles are on the course.
That's right. And see, my kids were at a time where social media wasn't
a thing. So
No.
that's a whole other thing.
Because I was raised in the 50s. I was like, Mayberry, USA type thing.
Sure.
And then that my kids were raised, still with, we had the Mickey Mouse cartoon club. We loved Mickey
Mouse.
What
she's wearing.
We loved. I've been to Disney World 7 times.
Great. Well, this has been
and Harry Potter.
And Harry Potter
was a big thing.
Yes.
Harry Potter was a big thing.
You've always loved
I always loved Harry Potter. Yeah.
And
my sisters, we were all big Harry Potter.
If anybody wants to, it must have been like 4 years ago. I did a Harry Potter show with David Glossaman. He was my guest, and we went into Harry Potter and spiritualism. So you can look back at that videos. We actually dressed up like Harry Potter people. You need to go back and look at that archive video because this is year 6 of Wednesdays in Willa. So there are lots of shows to go back.
What year was it with David?
I can't remember what year it was.
Yeah.
I'll try to maybe look it up later. But I knew you'd like that one.
we Jason Thomas, I think I told you, read the book and I said, what are you reading? The thing was that big. And he had trouble reading. So this was a big thing. He said, Toddy, it's Harry Potter. You got to read it. Okay. So his mother called. She said, he's been bugging me to get this book to you. I couldn't put it down. So I called my sisters. I did the same thing with spiritualism.
Yeah.
I would go to class. I would call my sisters in St. Louis. You got to hear this. You got to hear this practice. And so Alice came. Lucille came. So you affect other people. I mean, I'm very happy that they all chose to get involved in spiritualism. And when Elaine Thomas passed, I said to Mark, I wrote to Mark, she affected not only me, but my sisters and their families and my kids.
That circle,
that whole spiritual, it goes out. It goes out. And so she started the ripple. I mean, we have to be open to it.
Sure.
But see, that spiritualism went right to my kids, went right to them. Whoever wanted to pick it up.
Yes.
And some did, some not so much.
And that's the way it is.
I know. So you just have to sit back at the end of the day and say, I did the best I could.
Exactly.
If I made mistakes, it's too late now.
It's too late. But you can do your best to apologize, make good for it, as it were, and look for the delights of what you've done too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you get grandkids.
And then you get grandkids.
That aren't your responsibility. You're not responsible how they turn out. All you can do is love them, and they call me Grandma Dottie, but you're not responsible. It just lifts a lot of responsibility off of you.
For the different phases of life that we can embrace and learn from. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been lovely. I really appreciate you sharing with everyone.
It just gives me a chance to talk about things that you do, things that you felt you did well, and knowing that there's things that you could have done different.
Yes, that's right. And we've all been in a place where we felt vulnerable about ourselves and the judgments we've had about ourselves. And I encourage everyone to open themselves up to feel their discernment of those matters and really look at them for what you need to learn from them, so
Yeah.
you can move forward, so you can do better and
Yeah.
right by your family. And I would just say a special blessing on everyone's family today, that they feel that love permeating all of their family members' existence, and that lifts them up in all aspects of their life, that they can enter more and more into that state of pure joy and recognition of the spirit, the infinite intelligence, the source of all.
I agree with you 100%. I couldn't live my life without. And I do have to pick it up every day to remind myself. It's a constant reminder.
Yes, indeed.
And your kids, they are a product of us, but we don't have to be perfect. We can just love them, and that's all we can do.
Do the best to be the divine right mother, the divine right father, divine right parent to
Yeah.
your children in those circumstances, so that's what you're engaging with.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Oh,
You're welcome.
oh, that is so wonderful. Thank you for everyone for tuning into the show today. And there'll be another great show for you to watch. Tune in next week for Wednesdays with Willa. Same time, same place, 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. All right, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.